It is my privilege to introduce to you a statesman who recognized the relationship between economic development, jobs, and clean air energy. House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer represents Maryland's 5th Congressional District, which includes Calvert County, the site for Unistar's proposed Calvert Cliffs 3 project. Congressman Hoyer is a dedicated supporter of the environment. He has demonstrated his commitment to helping the nation and the state of Maryland meet our future energy needs while strengthening our economy and creating jobs in Calvert County and across the nation. We benefit greatly from his leadership in Congress, and it is with great honor that I introduce to you House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer.
Well, thank you very much. You guys are right on time, that's for sure. I'm right on time myself, which surprises, I know, all of you. But I am pleased to be here, but apologize, I'm going to speak, and then as I told David Gilbert, I got to run out because I've got a meeting at 9:30 that I have to be at. But I wanted to come down here, join my friends here with Constellation, of course, George, Mary Fattel, David Gilbert, who said he'd done his job with Hannah. He got me from the front door here. Mike Wallace and Brew Barron. I want to thank all of you for your leadership and for your work. I sort of feel like the astronauts. You know, see that picture on the front page of the Washington Post today? Out here with all this, I'm floating around in space. I want to welcome all of you to this very important conference. And I want to applaud your commitment to clean air, to lower emissions, and to nuclear technology that will help us get there. My message to you is a simple one. Nuclear energy is part of the solution. We can't get to where we want to be, in my view, without substantial utilization of nuclear energy, period. I make that case on a regular basis. And by the way, my friend Jim Clyburn, who's the Democratic whip, sits right beside me in the leadership meetings, and Speaker looks over at us as the nuclear twins, I think. But she knows where we're coming from, and she's been helpful. In all my years in Congress, we have never had a better chance to transform America's energy strategy than the chance we'll have in the next few months. Along with health care reform, energy legislation may be the defining work of the 111th Congress. So it is essential that we get it right. I'm glad that we continue to make progress on energy legislation. You've been reading about it. Chairman Waxman and Markey expect it to be reported out of the committee by Memorial Day. That's by this Friday. And we expect it on the House floor before the August recess, perhaps as early as sometime in June. Of course, the part of that bill that has attracted the most public attention has been its cap-and-trade provisions. Cap-and-trade would be America's first serious effort to account for the cost of carbon emissions, and it would be our most important response to global warming to date. Of course, the questions surrounding an emissions cap, scientific, economic, and political questions, are complex. But for more Americans every day, this is at base a moral question. As conservative columnist Michael Gerson put it last week in the Washington Post, and I quote, "For many Americans, especially the young, concerns about carbon emissions and climate disruption is no longer a conviction, it is a value. For those concerned that the costs of cap-and-trade are too high, I answer that two costs are higher. First, the cost of inaction. The Congressional Budget Office has estimated that warming of at least 7 degrees by 2100 will cost us 3% of America's projected GDP. The longer we wait to act on emissions, the more painful and expensive the consequences will be. While there is some controversy regarding that proposition, not much, I suggest to you. And second, the opportunity cost to our economy of not seizing the growing global interest in the most important emerging economic sector, new energy technology. Cap-and-trade legislation will send a strong price signal to the private sector, spurring innovation in renewable energy technology and the creation of clean energy jobs, which is, of course, what you do. But there's more to the coming energy legislation than cap and trade. There's a renewable electricity standard of 20% by 2020, which allows up to 5% of the standard to be met with energy efficiency. With flexibility for governors to lower the standard further, new nuclear energy is excluded from the baseline, a very important facet for your industry. And there is a provision especially important to me, allowing companies to offset some of these emissions by becoming stewards of the world's forests. For all the talk about fossil fuels, the destruction of the world's forests is one of the most dangerous and most overlooked causes of global warming. That destruction is responsible for nearly 20% of global greenhouse gas emissions. 20%, more than all the cars, trucks, buses, and planes on the planet put together. That was an amazing statistic when I first heard it. That's why the Waxman-Markey draft includes both direct investments to prevent deforestation and provisions that allow companies to claim some credit for reducing emissions by funding the conservation of forests in America and throughout the world. By getting developing countries to cap their forestry sectors, the legislation would provide an important way for the developing world to buy into a system of emissions reduction, and it would allow American businesses a less expensive and more flexible way to curb emissions. Then there is the part of the energy legislation nearest and dearest to you, of course, the provisions that affect nuclear energy. I want to make this very clear. As important as cap and trade is, any policy with a realistic chance of fighting emissions, protecting our economy, and breaking our dependence on foreign sources of energy must be a policy that invests in nuclear power. I know that the view is not shared by everyone, not necessarily in this room, but in other rooms. However, I am working to ensure that the alternative of nuclear power, which I believe is safe, clearly carbon neutral, is very much a part of our energy policy. As you know, one of the biggest issues facing the development of nuclear power reactors is cost. It's expensive up front. Cheaper perhaps in the long run, but expensive up front. A new plant requires an investment of $5 to $7 billion. I work to make sure that the Title 17 loan guarantee program, the federal mechanism the industry needs to develop new plants, stayed funded at $18.5 billion in fiscal 2009 omnibus. I also want to make sure that the program is workable. So I've supported and contributed to the amendment that will be offered by Chairman Emeritus Dingell at the markup of the energy legislation. That amendment will add a nuclear title to the legislation, so let me explain some of its components. First, in changing the Title 17 loan guarantee program, the nuclear title makes clear that a final term sheet from the Secretary of Energy constitutes a binding commitment. That will allow energy projects to obtain the non-federal financing they need with surety that the federal government will proceed. The title also makes a long overdue change affecting labor, which the nuclear industry should be commended for supporting. It adds Davis-Bacon prevailing wage protections to the Title 17 program. When the federal government helps fund new energy projects, it also wants to ensure that the workers building them get fair wages. Your industry has been a leader in that effort. The amendment offered by Chairman Dingell would also create new clean energy deployment administration at DOE. The provision has broad support among Democrats of many different political views from many different regions, from Chairman Dingell to Representative Inslee to Majority Whip Clyburn to myself. The Clean Energy Deployment Administration, with members appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate, would provide financing to a wide range of energy technologies, including nuclear projects. The idea of a new funding mechanism for energy projects in the form of an energy bank is being debated in committee on both sides of Congress, and I'm glad that that's occurring. But I also want to stress that it should not immediately displace existing programs. For those who have waited patiently in line for Title 17 loan guarantees, it would be unfair to now go to the back of the line. I'm going to be working to ensure that that does not happen. Financing, though, is not the only long-term nuclear issue. There's the issue of industrial infrastructure. making sure we have the steel forging